What if I told you that some of your most difficult relationships, your biggest mistakes, even your strongest desires weren't entirely yours? What if they were psychological tricks your mind plays on you every single day without you realizing it? Carl Jung didn't just study the human psyche, he revealed how the unconscious controls us more than we dare admit. And among his most unsettling discoveries was this: most people are sleepwalking through life, driven by hidden forces they neither see nor understand. But a rare few, the 1%, wake up. This video isn't about gimmicks or hacks. It's about deep psychological mechanisms, the ones that quietly dictate who you love, what you fear, why you sabotage yourself, and how you repeat the same painful patterns while calling them fate. We're going to unravel 10 of Jung's most powerful insights, starting with the ones that shape your perception of others and ending with how to reclaim your power from the unconscious. These are not just ideas, they are truths that once seen can't unseen.
So if you've ever felt like something deeper is pulling your strings, you're right. But now you're about to see the strings. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That line is not poetic philosophy, it's a psychological scalpel. At the heart of it is the concept of projection, one of the mind's most powerful defense mechanisms. Projection happens when we take parts of ourselves we can't accept, our shame, fear, desire, jealousy, or rage, and unconsciously cast them onto someone else. We don't say, "I'm angry." Instead, we feel someone else is too aggressive. We don't say, "I want control." We say, "They're so controlling." It's not awareness, it's a trick your psyche uses to avoid looking inward. The real danger of projection is that it creates a distorted reality, one where we think we're objectively reading the world, when in fact we're watching our own rejected self playing out in others. The woman who frustrates you with her confidence, she might be expressing the assertiveness you've buried. The friend you accuse of being emotionally distant, he might reflect the part of you that's afraid to get close. This isn't about blame, it's about ownership. Until you reclaim the parts of yourself you've exiled, you'll keep encountering them in others over and over again and calling it bad luck or drama. But really, it's your own psyche trying to get your attention. Jung believed that projection is one of the key barriers to individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. Because every time we disown a trait, we deny ourselves the opportunity to integrate it. And every time we project it onto someone else, we give away our power. That's the cost of projection. You lose sight of who you really are. You become a fragmented self, haunted by traits that feel foreign, alien, or threatening. But they're not foreign. They're yours. They've just been pushed into the dark, into the shadow. And the shadow always finds a way to be seen, usually through someone else's face. The first step to breaking the projection loop is to become curious, especially when you're emotionally charged. Ask yourself, what is this situation showing me about me? It's not always obvious. Sometimes the reflection is symbolic, inverted, or even aspirational. You might resent someone not because they resemble your worst traits, but because they embody a part of you that you've never allowed to live. Jung didn't want people to live without darkness. He wanted them to know where their darkness is, because only then can you stop projecting it onto the world. And once you do, something extraordinary happens. You start to see people as they really are, not as mirrors, but as individuals. That is freedom. Have you ever felt inexplicably drawn to someone? Not because they made you feel whole, but because they made you feel something familiar? Maybe it was a partner who ignored you the same way your father once did. Or a friend whose constant criticism echoed the voice you grew up hearing in your own home. This isn't coincidence. It's mirroring, the psychological phenomenon where we're magnetized to people who reflect back to us the unresolved emotional patterns we carry within.
Jung would say we don't meet people by accident. We are drawn, often unconsciously, to those who help us revisit the unfinished chapters of our emotional story. Mirroring is seductive because it feels like recognition. We call it chemistry, connection, or feeling seen. But sometimes what we're recognizing in the other is not love, it's a wound. And our psyche isn't just seeking comfort, it's seeking resolution. We're wired to return to the scene of the crime, hoping that maybe this time it will end differently. But most of the time, it doesn't. That's why so many of our closest relationships, romantic or otherwise, often feel like a strange blend of love and pain. We don't just fall for people who compliment us, we fall for people who activate us because they hold the mirror to the parts of us we've never fully healed. Carl Jung referred to this magnetic pull as the repetition of the complex, a psychological loop where we recreate dynamics from our past, not out of weakness, but because we're trying to evolve. The mirror isn't meant to hurt you, it's meant to show you. But the lesson only reveals itself when we stop blaming the other person and start asking, why did I need this mirror? What part of me is still calling out to be seen, loved, or understood? Until we ask those questions, we stay trapped in relationships that feel karmic, intense, fated, and painful, when really they are invitations to do what we've avoided for years, face ourselves. Here's the paradox. The people who mirror our wounds also offer the clearest path to our healing, not by fixing us, but by exposing what we've hidden. That's why mirroring is not just a trick of the psyche, it's a map. The more emotionally reactive we are to someone, the more likely they are reflecting something unhealed inside of us. That doesn't mean we should tolerate abuse or dysfunction. It means we pause and ask, what part of me needed this mirror to be shattered in order to see clearly? When you take responsibility for what the mirror reflects, you step into a deeper form of self-awareness, one that doesn't just seek love, but learns how to receive it without distortion. From the moment we're born, we begin adapting not to thrive, but to survive. As children, we instinctively learn that certain behaviors get us love, others get us silence, and some get us punished. So we start shaping ourselves accordingly. We smile when we feel sad. We become good when we want to scream. We hide what feels real and amplify what feels rewarded. This survival tactic is called identification, the process of becoming what is expected rather than what is true. Over time, we don't just act like someone we're not, we forget we're even acting. The role becomes the identity. And this is how the false self is born. Carl Jung called this the overdeveloped persona, the social mask we construct to navigate the world. It's not fake, it's functional. But when we over-identify with it, it becomes a prison. We think we're the confident achiever, the helpful friend, the always fine caretaker. But these identities are often just defense mechanisms in disguise. Armor we wear because somewhere along the way, our real self wasn't safe to show. The trick of identification is that it keeps us protected, but also profoundly disconnected, not only from others, but from our own truth. You might wonder, but isn't this just who I am? That's the most dangerous part of this psychological trick. Identification feels so familiar that we mistake it for authenticity. But true selfhood isn't born in adaptation, it's born in integration. It requires us to examine which parts of our identity were chosen and which were assigned, which parts come from fear and which from freedom. Jung believed the path to individuation involved peeling back the layers of false identity, not to destroy the persona, but to loosen its grip, to stop mistaking who you needed to be for who you are. The antidote to false identification isn't rebellion, it's awareness. You don't need to abandon your public face, you just need to ask, does this role serve me or silence me? Does it feel like a home or a performance? The hardest truth is this: we often cling to our adapted selves not because they fulfill us, but because they protect us. But that protection comes at a cost, usually the loss of our most authentic voice. To reclaim it, you don't need to destroy the persona, you need to see through it. And once you do, you open the door not just to safety, but to wholeness. We often think of our shadow as something ugly: rage, jealousy, desire, shame, something to avoid, something to bury. But Carl Jung had a very different view. He believed the shadow is not just dark, it's powerful, alive, and deeply seductive. Why? Because it contains the parts of us we've denied, disowned, or deemed unacceptable. And anything we push into the unconscious becomes magnetic. We are drawn to our shadow not because we like what we see, but because it holds the energy of everything we are but pretend not to be. And like a secret lover, it calls to us when we least expect it. You can see shadow seduction everywhere. In the charismatic rebel we can't stop thinking about. In the thrill of breaking rules. In the strange satisfaction of saying something cruel when we've been too nice for too long. That's the shadow speaking, and it doesn't knock, it kicks the door open. We're taught to behave, to conform, to suppress, but the more we do, the stronger the seduction becomes. The shadow doesn't go away because we ignore it, it waits. And then it shows up in addictions, obsessions, affairs, and breakdowns. Not to punish us, but to reclaim its place in the psyche. Jung's genius was in seeing that the shadow wasn't evil, it was unlived life. The anger you suppress might be the boundary you've never had the courage to set. The envy you deny might point to a dream you've never let yourself want. The sexuality you're ashamed of might be where your vitality lives. This is why the shadow is seductive. It holds truth wrapped in taboo. And the longer you exile it, the more power it gains over you. The moment you acknowledge it, honestly, without shame, is the moment it stops controlling you from the dark. So the question isn't whether you have a shadow, everyone does. The question is, are you brave enough to face yours before it forces you to? Shadow work isn't about indulging the darkness, it's about owning it, looking it in the eye and saying, I see you. You are part of me. Only then can the shadow be integrated, not as a threat, but as a source of depth, authenticity, and power. When you embrace what you once denied, you don't become dangerous. You become whole. And in that wholeness, there's no longer a need to chase the shadow, because it's finally come home. There's a voice inside you that doesn't want you to succeed, not because it hates you, but because it's afraid. This is the inner saboteur, the part of you that ruins things when they're going well, that picks fights right before intimacy, that procrastinates just before a breakthrough, that turns dreams into distant fantasies. And here's the disturbing truth. The saboteur is not an enemy, it's a protector. Twisted, confused, but trying to help in the only way it knows how. Carl Jung believed that much of our self-destruction isn't evil, it's unconscious. We break what we most want not out of malice, but out of unresolved fear. The inner saboteur is born in childhood, usually at the intersection of shame and survival. Maybe every time you were confident, someone made you feel arrogant. Maybe success brought attention you didn't know how to handle. Maybe love was given with conditions, and so part of you learned it's safer not to shine, it's safer to stay small. Over time, that belief hardens into identity, and when you get close to happiness, success, intimacy, the saboteur whispers, "You don't deserve this." And you listen, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. It's the pain you know. Jung described this as a complex, a cluster of emotional wounds and defenses stored in the unconscious. And when the complex is triggered, you aren't fully in control. You sabotage not logically, but compulsively. You send the text you said you wouldn't. You ghost the opportunity you dreamed of. You say no when your soul screams yes. And then you tell yourself, I ruined it again. But this is not about weakness. It's about unconscious loyalty to your old self, your old story, your old pain. And until that story is rewritten, you will keep repeating the same ending. So how do you silence the saboteur? You don't. You listen to it. You ask, what are you trying to protect me from? Often, the answer is heartbreak, rejection, humiliation. The saboteur doesn't need punishment. It needs reparenting. It needs you to say, thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I'm not that helpless child anymore. I can handle this now. That's when the dynamic shifts. Self-sabotage stops being a cycle and starts becoming a signal. A sign that you're stepping into a new level of life, one that your past self never believed was possible, but your present self does, and that's the difference. Carl Jung believed that we're not as original as we think. Beneath our personal experiences lie universal patterns, deep, symbolic structures that shape the way we see the world, relate to others, and understand ourselves. These are the archetypes: the mother, the hero, the victim, the lover, the trickster. We don't invent these stories, we inherit them. And often they live inside us long before we know their names. Jung wrote that we are possessed by archetypes, not metaphorically, but literally. They influence who we're drawn to, what roles we adopt in relationships, and why some dynamics feel fated, even if they're destructive. Have you ever felt an instant, irrational pull towards someone, a feeling of "I've known you forever"? Or fallen into the same kind of relationship over and over, even when you swore you wouldn't? That's archetypal energy at play. It bypasses logic and speaks to the soul's memory, the part of you that recognizes ancient patterns in modern disguises. You might be drawn to someone because they unconsciously activate the wounded healer in you, the part that wants to fix others to avoid healing yourself. Or maybe you always play the savior because it gives you purpose, even if it leaves you emotionally starved. These aren't accidents, they're scripts. The most seductive thing about archetypes is that they feel like fate. You don't just love someone, you feel destined to love them. You don't just choose your career, it feels like a calling. But often what feels like destiny is really just unconscious identification. You're not living freely, you're playing out a myth. Jung's goal wasn't to erase archetypes, it was to help us see them clearly. Because once you recognize the pattern, you stop being its puppet and start becoming its conscious participant. You don't destroy the archetype, you dance with it without letting it lead. So ask yourself, what roles do I keep playing, even when they no longer serve me? What kinds of people do I always attract, and why? When you uncover the archetype, you begin to unlock the hidden narrative driving your life. And when you step outside that narrative, you reclaim something precious: choice. You don't have to fall for the same character. You don't have to be the rescuer, the martyr, the rebel. You can become something new, something conscious. Because awareness doesn't just change your story. It reveals that you were never just a character in someone else's myth. You were the author all along. On the surface, being nice looks harmless, even admirable. You're polite, agreeable, selfless. People like you. But beneath this mask, something far more dangerous can be brewing: resentment, exhaustion, invisibility. Carl Jung called the persona the mask we present to the world, the version of ourselves crafted not from authenticity but from adaptation. At first, it feels like armor. You learn to behave in ways that make you lovable, safe, accepted. But over time, the persona becomes a cage, one so subtle you forget it's even there. You're no longer acting nice, you are nice, and yet you feel empty. The danger of the persona isn't that it exists, it's that we identify with it. We believe that being agreeable, self-sacrificing, or emotionally predictable is our true nature, but often it's just what we learned was safe.
Maybe as a child, love was conditional. Maybe conflict led to chaos. So you smiled instead of crying. You helped instead of speaking up. You forgave when you wanted to scream. And now, as an adult, that mask is so fused with your identity that the very thought of expressing your anger, your needs, your boundaries feels wrong, even selfish. But here's the cost. When you hide behind the nice mask for too long, you disappear. People love you, but they love the version of you that never causes waves. Relationships feel shallow. Your voice feels distant. You become a master at attuning to what others need while never asking what you need. Jung warned that the over-identification with the persona leads to a split in the psyche, a fracture between the outer image and the inner reality. The world may see light while inside you're drowning in unspoken rage, shame, or loneliness. And that gap becomes unbearable. To escape the persona trap, you don't need to become rude, aggressive, or harsh. You need to become real. That means risking disapproval, saying no, speaking up when your instincts say stay quiet, letting people see the parts of you that aren't polished or pleasing. Jung believed individuation, the path to wholeness, required us to reclaim all the parts we abandoned for acceptance. So the next time you find yourself defaulting to nice, ask, what am I afraid will happen if I show up as I am? Because true connection doesn't come from being liked, it comes from being known. Why do we keep returning to what breaks us? Why do we love people who hurt us, choose paths that exhaust us, or sabotage moments that could liberate us? The answer is rarely logical. It's emotional memory. Carl Jung observed that the psyche is drawn to familiarity, not necessarily fulfillment. If your earliest experiences of love were wrapped in chaos, silence, manipulation, or abandonment, that becomes your blueprint.
You may despise it on the surface, but at a deeper level, it feels normal. So when life offers peace, consistency, or intimacy, it can feel strangely uncomfortable, almost wrong. This is the trick of familiar pain. It disguises itself as belonging. You might think you're choosing freely, but more often you're being pulled by old patterns, reenacting old roles. The neglected child finds partners who are emotionally unavailable. The over-responsible child attracts people who need saving. These aren't accidents. They're emotional echoes, the psyche's attempt to return to the original wound, hoping to resolve it. But unless that wound is made conscious, it doesn't heal. It repeats. And the more unconscious it is, the more seductive it becomes, pulling you into relationships and situations that recreate the very thing you're running from. Jung called this repetition compulsion, the drive to relive emotional injuries from the past in the hope that this time we'll master them. But this hope is often unconscious.
We don't know we're doing it. We just find ourselves in the same arguments, the same heartbreak, the same defeat again and again. And each time we ask, why does this keep happening to me? But the better question is, what in me is drawn to this experience? What story am I still trying to rewrite? Only when we trace the pain to its source can we stop repeating it, not by willpower, but by understanding. Breaking the cycle of familiar pain doesn't mean rejecting your past, it means integrating it. You recognize the patterns, name them, and begin choosing something different, even when it feels uncomfortable. That discomfort is a good sign. It means you're stepping outside the pattern. Jung believed healing comes when the unconscious becomes conscious, when the wound is no longer driving the behavior in the dark. And that kind of awareness doesn't just stop the repetition, it transforms it. You stop seeking pain in the name of love, you start choosing love in the name of healing. Have you ever ended up in situations you swore you'd avoid? Jobs that drain you, relationships that devalue you, lives that feel too small for your soul?
It's not always because of poor decisions. Sometimes it's because of an unconscious agreement, a silent yes whispered from the parts of you that were conditioned to accept fear as fate. Carl Jung believed that what we fail to make conscious becomes our destiny. The parts of us that feel undeserving, small, or shameful don't just sit quietly in the background. They act, they choose, and they say yes to what keeps them alive, even if it slowly kills you. This is the unconscious yes, the part of you that agrees to stay silent when your voice is screaming, to settle when your soul is aching, to endure when your truth is begging for freedom. Why? Because long ago you were taught that safety lies in predictability, even if it's painful. Maybe it was safer to be invisible than to risk rejection, safer to tolerate abuse than to lose connection, safer to be good than to be real. And now that programming still runs in the background. Every time you say, "I guess this is fine," but feel dead inside, your unconscious just said yes.
Jung didn't pathologize this. He saw it as a natural outcome of psychic fragmentation. The conscious mind says, "I want to grow," but the unconscious says, "Growth is dangerous." So when your life contradicts your dreams, it's not because you're lazy or broken. It's because part of you is still loyal to the fear. It says yes to being small because being seen once led to pain. It says yes to chaos because peace was never modeled. It says yes to repression because expression felt like betrayal. Until these fears are made conscious, they'll keep running your life under the illusion of choice. So how do you stop saying yes to what you secretly fear? By shining light on the belief beneath the choice. Ask yourself, what do I believe will happen if I choose what I truly want? That question reveals the contract your unconscious is still bound to. Jung believed awareness dissolves these contracts. When you name the fear, when you see it, hold it, and question it, you begin to renegotiate your reality.
You stop betraying yourself for false safety, and you start making choices not from fear, but from freedom. That's when the yes becomes sacred, no longer a survival response, but a conscious act of self-respect. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But there's a turning point, a moment when something within you begins to watch instead of just act. That's the birth of the inner observer, the part of you capable of noticing your patterns without being consumed by them. Most people live in reactivity, enslaved by old wounds and unconscious scripts. But the moment you begin to witness your own mind, to hear the saboteur, to feel the compulsion, to see the projection, you are no longer just the actor. You become the watcher. The observer doesn't judge. It doesn't shame. It simply sees. It notices when you're about to self-sabotage and gently asks, "Why now?" It hears the voice that says, "You're not good enough," and responds with, "Whose voice is that, really?"
In Jungian terms, this is the rise of consciousness, the beginning of individuation. Not perfection, but integration. You no longer fight the shadow, you recognize it. You no longer deny your projection, you reclaim it. You begin to notice your patterns in real time, and that awareness alone can begin to dissolve them. Because the power of a trick ends when you realize you're watching a performance. Awakening the observer is not a one-time event, it's a practice, a way of living. It requires curiosity instead of condemnation. Instead of saying, "I messed up again," you ask, "What was I afraid of in that moment?" Instead of beating yourself up for choosing chaos, you say, "This pattern kept me safe once. Does it still serve me now?" Jung believed that the psyche wants to heal, the unconscious wants to be known. And the more you observe with compassion, the more the fragmented parts of you begin to soften, to return, to rejoin the self, not through force, but through recognition. When the observer is fully alive in you, something radical happens. You stop being your pain. You can still feel it, hold it, listen to it, but it no longer defines you. You can see the projection and choose not to throw it. You can hear the saboteur and still move forward. You can feel the shadow rise and still remain centered. That's real power. Not dominance over the self, but dialogue with it.
You're no longer a puppet of your past. You're a conscious participant in your becoming. And that is how you take your power back. Not by denying your darkness, but by seeing it fully and choosing anyway. To live unconsciously is to be bound by invisible chains, patterns inherited, fears unspoken, and shadows denied. For too long, these hidden forces have shaped your story without your consent, scripting your choices, your relationships, your very sense of self. But the journey through these 10 psychological truths reveals something radical. You are not your patterns. You are the awareness beyond them. Carl Jung's profound insight reminds us that the path to freedom is not about erasing darkness, but about embracing it, bringing the unconscious into the light so it no longer controls us from the shadows.
This awakening is not a destination, but a lifelong dance, a delicate balance between acceptance and transformation, compassion and courage. You've seen how projection, archetypes, the saboteur, and the persona all play their parts. You've walked through the pain of familiar wounds and the chains of unconscious consent. And now you stand at the threshold of a new reality, one where you hold the pen to your story, where you claim the power to rewrite, to heal, to become whole. This is the power of the observer within you, the witness that watches without judgment, the voice that says, "I see you, and I choose to move forward anyway." When you cultivate this awareness, you reclaim your freedom. You stop being a victim of unseen forces and become the architect of your life. So take a deep breath, honor the journey you've traveled, and step forward, not into a life free of darkness, but into one illuminated by consciousness. Because true power isn't the absence of struggle, but the courage to meet it with open eyes and an open heart.
This is your awakening. This is your freedom.